About 12 to 15 years ago, I got on my knees and I begged God to take the disease of addiction away from me. I also prayed to that same God to die in my sleep. I no longer wanted to live. I had destroyed every vestige of good things in my life, living a life addicted to sex, drugs, and alcohol. I built an amazing life for decades, but I was also battling a very dark secret. The disease of alcoholism was tearing apart my insides, creating a mindset of inferiority and a mindset of never feeling like I quite fit in. Alcoholism, sex, and drugs ultimately brought me to my knees. The addictions swallowed up my career. They swallowed up my financial security. They swallowed up any pride I had for anything good in my life. They swallowed up my desire to live, and they swallowed up my life purpose. I was on my knees one day, begging God to die in my sleep. I didn't want to live. So I decided, as now a survivor of addiction that ultimately brought me to my knees, I was given a gift, the gift of desperation, where I fell to my knees to a point where I lost all hope in drugs, in sex, and in alcohol. I needed an entirely new design for living. And I am over a decade sober from addictive behaviors. I am over a decade sober from alcohol and drugs. I owe it to so many variables that played a role in my recovery. One and foremost is my connection to God, my higher power as I choose to see Him. I owe it all to a mentor who gave me and taught me, encouraged me to live a new design that would work, one that would make me peaceful and serene. And I finally got to the point where the gift of desperation opened my eyes to an entirely new way to live. But I had to lose everything to get that gift. And I wanted to share my story of success and prominence to a humiliating demise, to receiving that gift of desperation. A life of surrender gave me strength and power and purpose and a good life. And I want my story to encourage others who are struggling with addictions, obsessive compulsive behaviors, living a life of misery and mental emotional torment, that yes, there is a way out, there is a new design, and please, I was in such a horrific place of mind and body that if I can recover, believe me, please believe me, you can too. There are so many people who are suffering. 46 million Americans struggle with addiction today. 15 million are alcoholic. 95,000 people a year lose their life to alcoholism. 24 million Americans struggle with sex addiction. I had all three of these addictions. I was wrapped deeply in the grips of sex addiction, crystal meth addiction, and alcohol addiction. And today, I am nearly 11 years sober and clean. So I hope that my story can encourage you and motivate you that there is a way out. There is another design of living that works, and I promise if you give recovery a chance and escape from the grips and horrors and darkness of addiction, that there's another side to life that you will love. I don't want to sound too corny or emotional here, but I found a wonderful solution and a beautiful life that I want to share with you, my story. So tomorrow, I'm 10 years sober. And I wanted to share in this meeting today because this is the first meeting I came to 5 years ago when I was released from prison. So I was released from prison July 12th, 5 years ago, 2017. So this week is an interesting week. So tomorrow's my 10-year sobriety. It's also my arrest date. And from the day I got arrested tomorrow, 5 years ago, I wouldn't see the freedom of outside for 5 more years. And I didn't know that the day I got arrested. There was about 36 months of the 60 months I was incarcerated, I didn't get to see the sun. I was just in a dark cell for 36 months, 3 years in a dark cell. And I had, before I was arrested, I had hit such a hard bottom. Alcoholism destroyed my career, my reputation, destroyed my morals and values. Any morals and values I did live by progressively decayed as my alcoholism grew and intensified and ultimately took over. Before my arrest, I decided to start using drugs, and crystal meth became my drug of choice. So for nearly 2 years, I was quickly addicted to crystal meth. And crystal meth is ultimately what brought me to my arrest. Now, it wasn't the drugs that brought me to my arrest, it was my behaviors. I had absolutely no morals, no values, exceedingly selfish, 100% destructive of my own life, my family, my friends, my reputation. My reputation went from local fame to local and national humiliation. My behaviors were at a state of morals and values that were animalistic. Before I reached that bottom and got arrested, I had years of success, years of money. I mean, I would go out to restaurants and people would come over and interrupt me for my autograph. I was in international fitness magazines. I had a decent amount of money. I owned home and cars, but I was an alcoholic, and my alcoholism was very, let's just say I was functioning for quite a long time. And even though I was functioning and seemingly appeared successful and happy and content, that was all the facade. There really was none of that inside. Long before my reputation was destroyed, long before I ended up bankrupt, sleeping on park benches and on friends' couches, I felt a self-loathing and an inferiority that was so painful to endure. But I became so accustomed to all the masks I was wearing of confidence and conceit and success that there came a point where I believed I was those things on the outside of me, the house, the cars, the career, the money, and I didn't have any idea really who I was anymore. Not only did I wear so many masks, I didn't know who I was, which I say all the time. I think from a lot of alcoholics and drug addicts I know, and even people that aren't, the world is a huge masquerade ball of masks. And I used to always judge my insides by everybody's outsides, until I learned that a lot of people's hearts are breaking. A lot of people are really broken because we don't walk around showing that, and who's going to walk around talking about the pain I'm in? When I was in alcoholism and drug addiction, I hid everything. But what had happened was there was no hiding anymore, because really when I lost all my morals and values, I lost my career and I was humiliated, there was no more hiding really who I became. You know, I used to say that I became a bad person But innately, I was always a good person, a God-centered person. I was always connected to God, and I was always whole. But I just didn't know that because I lived in my ego. I lived in that ego that tells me everything I need is outside of me. Everything I need to be whole and fulfilled and content is in the money, the drugs, the sex, the alcohol, the bigger house, the nicer car, etc. So I defined myself by those things for so long that I just lost who I was. Alcoholism was an interesting thing for me because when I first came in the rooms in 2002, and it took me 10 years in the rooms. Now, I was out of the rooms a lot too. I would come in basically, vomit to all of you, and then leave. And then come back in, vomit, and then leave, like vocal vomit. But I certainly 100% did not want to be you guys. No, I did not want to be an alcoholic. Being an alcoholic meant that I'm weak. It's a shameful thing to be an alcoholic. I was too prideful to be what you people are. So my sponsor, I have a sponsor since 2002, so 20 years now. His name is Tony. Love the man. I was down in West Palm Beach, that's where he lives, a couple of weeks ago, and we went out to a beautiful lunch, and I cried several times with this man because he saved my life. He gave me suggestions for 10 years. I filed them, but I didn't take them. I filed those suggestions, but I simply just took all my suggestions. My suggestions was the way to go. And, when he gave me his suggestions, he would predict the outcome of my suggestion. And seriously, it was uncanny. This man, how he knew the outcomes of every one of my suggestions was unbelievable to me. And it was repetitive because every suggestion that I took of mine, he would continue to tell me the outcome, and I wouldn't believe it for years. And he watched my demise. I mean, I didn't realize how painful it was for him to watch my demise until I started sponsoring people and watched their demise. It's painful to witness, but the powerlessness is a fact of that. He was 100% powerless over me. So I went from local fame, financial security. I built a 16-year career following my childhood dream. I became my father's prodigy. I fulfilled a career that my father wanted since a child, but he was in foster care and didn't have any of the support and encouragement and motivation that he needed to fulfill his career. He did well in his life, but I'm the one that became his prodigy, okay? I filled his career. So his dreams came true through me. And that meant a lot to me to make my dad happy with that. My parents were very supportive and encouraging of me. There's no alcoholism in my family. There's no drug addiction in my family. So certainly my genetic background didn't show that I would be an alcoholic or a drug addict. And I was way too successful and prideful, too good looking, and I did fitness modeling. I had too many abs to be an alcoholic. This was not me. And my sponsor would tell me, he would ask me actually, do you think that maybe you're an alcoholic? He asked me that question dozens of times through the years. Do you think maybe you're an alcoholic? Now he knew I was, but I just know. I know I abuse it, but I came into the rooms because I wanted to learn how to live with drinking. I wanted to learn how to live doing the things I wanted to do. So I'm going to kind of take some stuff so I can grow a little, but I wanted to keep doing what I wanted to do. I'm multi-addicted. I certainly 100% have that obsessive compulsive disorder where I obsess and become compulsive of a lot of things that make me feel good. I was one of those that was addicted to pornography, sex, drugs, alcohol, anything that made me feel good. Anything that gave me a sense of being important. I was relationship addicted. I loved being in relationships. I could not be alone for 5 minutes because I valued who I was as a human being by having someone value me. And if someone wasn't with me, I didn't want to be with me. If I had an acquaintance or some person in my group that didn't like me, I put every effort in to make them like me. I would kiss their ass and wonder, why don't you like me? Like, what is that? Because if I'm not liked, I'm certainly not valuable, because I felt that way on the inside. So I needed the value on the outside. And I got that seemingly through sex and relationships, valued and loved and nurtured. And somehow my brain wired together that sex made me feel loved and nurtured. And when I drank, it made that more intense. And the drugs made that even more intense. So I didn't truly know I was an alcoholic and addict. Now, I knew I had a problem, and that's why I came in the rooms in 2002, because I knew I had a problem. Not an alcoholic, not like you guys, but yes, I have a problem. I mean, I read all the self-help books and all the psychology books and researching how to control the brain, and did for years. It was a hobby of mine. I actually liked it. I took in a lot of knowledge, but it didn't mean anything. I had absolutely no application of any of that knowledge. When I realized I was truly an addict and alcoholic, it took me to calling my sponsor one day when I had a pipe in my hand and I so wanted to stop smoking. And he told me to smash the pipe on the ground with a brick and then go to a meeting. Smashing that pipe was like ending a relationship with my most closest companion. It was actually heartbreaking. And I remember I hit it with the brick, probably not hard enough, and it didn't break, and I thought that was a sign. Seriously. I was very, very intelligent, logical at the time, and I remember thinking, maybe I'm supposed to finish what's in there, you know? So my sponsor said, hit it harder. So finally it broke, shattered it to pieces. And he said, okay, so now go to a meeting. There was a meeting shortly after that. And I was literally on the phone with him an hour to break this pipe. I mean, it wasn't like, you know, he had to really push me. So I said, okay, I'll go to a meeting. We talked a couple more minutes. We got off the phone. I went and bought a new pipe and another bag. Immediately, within 10 minutes. It was such a compulsion. And then I remember getting on my knees to God, please take this away from me or I'm gonna die. And I semi-overdosed twice during that end there of my drug addiction. Now, quite frankly, I wasn't drinking at the time because drugs did it for me. That became my new drug of choice. Alcohol for over a decade, maybe 15 years, but that drug became my drug of choice. And I'm getting on my knees begging God to take it away from me. See, and that's one thing that I will never forget now 10 years later. There have been times in the last 10 years where I have had thoughts of drinking or using. And I have learned in recovery, I am not responsible for my first thought. The thoughts are going to come from a commercial, going down an old street, seeing someone that's living how I was. I am responsible what I do with that thought. Am I nourishing that thought? Am I nurturing that thought? Am I meditating on that thought? Because ultimately that's going to lead to action on that thought. So my second thought, most of the time, it's one of two things. I either throw it out to God, I rely on my higher power 100%. And two, if I have that amnesia, if I forgot how bad it was, which can happen, I don't know if anyone can relate to that, why did I get on my knees and beg God to take it away? And I say that every time I share, because it's very profound for me to remember getting on my knees and begging Him to take it away. Because if it was so good, why was I on my knees begging Him to take it away? If I have that amnesia, I remember that. So here comes recovery. And when I got arrested, it was the scariest day of my life. Now, I was arrested from behaviors. Some of you know my history, some of you know my story, some don't. Not proud of it. It's shameful. It's humiliating. It's not my morals and values, but it was my morals and values when I was high on meth. That's how I live, high on meth. But when I got arrested and I went to jail, my sponsor, I call him my spiritual advisor, Tony, he comes and he's on the opposite end of the plexiglass that I've only seen in movies, never thought I would be. And he says to me, and I say this every one of my shares, you've heard this before, if you've heard my story, it's another profound lesson in changing perception. Because ultimately what I had to do in recovery was change my perception of everything. I had to change my belief system on everything. I had to change my mindset on everything because I was extremely sick, mentally, emotionally, and spiritually. Intelligent, yes, but sick. He says, now you can either go on living how you are or have been. Now, if anyone's been in jail or prison, you know that everything's in there. All the drugs, all the alcohol, all the sex is in there. Or treat this as a spiritual retreat. You're away from the distractions. You can take off the masks and look in the mirror. My immediate response was spiritual retreat. Because I was, at that point, I took that metaphoric white flag and I waved it super high. I was so done. I prayed to God for a week to let me die in my sleep. I was so humiliated. And that's where my addiction and alcoholism brought me. It's just unbelievable. You know, I sat in the rooms and I heard all the stories. Losing families, losing careers, losing children, losing husbands, and all going to jail and prison. And none of that's going to happen to me. And it's just, when I look back, it's just, wow, that was like my higher power through you guys was telling me my future. And I just did not believe it. It was just, and the fact that my sponsor kept asking if I'm an alcoholic, there's no way I'm an alcoholic. I couldn't see it. It was so degrading. So now I'm in jail and I'm facing 50 years in prison, 42 years old, facing the rest of my life in prison. Now, I got accused of things I didn't do, and I got accused of things I did do. So it was a very trying time. So here I am going through, the day I got arrested, I was on a 5-day high. I think I slept 3 hours in 5 days the day I got arrested. I'm interrogated for 4 hours. And so now I'm going through, for the following weeks and months, I'm going through withdrawal, significant fear of the future, regret of what I did with my life, because now it's hitting me. Took that. My career, I started looking at, I lost my career. I mean, I just was so mortified at what I did to me. I don't have anyone to blame, no one to blame. I did it, and I had to carry the burden. You know, it's nice when someone else made a mistake and you got the consequence because you could blame them. I had to carry all of that, and then all the people I hurt, all the chaos I caused, getting clean and sober in there, being offered drugs. I was offered crystal meth. Can't tell you how many times I was offered meth in there, marijuana. And I remember I'd say no all the time, and believe me, I was craving it. But I figured, how low do I have to go? How bad does this have to get? My mother and father are crying on the phone. I mean, and I remember when they would ask me if I wanted to do some drugs, I'd say no, and I'd look up in the cell knowing that they're getting high, and how much I wanted to go in there and get high with them. And I just, you know, my sponsor says, you know, when you're done. You're done when you're done. There is no, you could die, you could go to prison, you could lose everything. Maybe you'll be fortunate enough that your bottom's a little higher. You're done when you're done. See, I was done then. No matter how much craving I had, done. The desire I had, done. The pain I was going through, done. At that time, it didn't matter. I was done. Now, I didn't stop hoping the judge would be lenient with me. As far as I'm concerned, I'm facing 50 years. So for a week, I prayed to God to die in my sleep every night. Don't let me wake up, please. I really didn't. Later, I was praying to the same God, thanking him for life, thanking him for helping to clear my mind. I was praying to the same. See, he saw that in me, that was going to happen to me if I just gave him a chance. I call my higher power him. My higher power is universal energy. My higher power is love. My higher power is connecting to nature, feeling the sun on my skin, listening to the waves of the ocean, putting my feet in the ocean. That's how I connect to my higher power. And it's powerful. It's powerful. So for the next 5 years incarcerated, this became my spiritual retreat. This became my spiritual sanctuary. It was exceedingly challenging, as you could probably imagine, or some of you may know. Exceedingly challenging, exceedingly depressing. I didn't see the sun for 36 months. It's 3 years. But I didn't blame anybody. I put myself there. And I don't blame myself beating myself up. That's what happens in alcoholism and addiction. I had to learn a whole new way of thinking. And I had very challenging experiences in there with a lot of challenging people. And what I needed to do is change my mindset. I had to change how I think, had to change how I look at others, had to change how I looked at myself. And my sponsor said to me, everyone in there that challenges you are to be your teachers. They're going to teach you tolerance, patience, forgiveness, acceptance. Look at people in there that challenge you as your teachers, because now you need to start practicing spiritual principles no matter how hard it is. And I did that. And I had remarkable experiences in there. Amazing experiences with inmates when I gave them a spiritual chance. You know, I started looking at a lot of people in there as broken. And it was just a matter of changing perceptions on everything. But what I had to do is I had to change perceptions about me. I saw my sponsor 2 weeks ago and I said to him, if I knew then what I know now, I'd probably still have my career. I was a weatherman on TV and NBC. It was my childhood dream. I said, I'd probably still be that. And he said something so profound to me. He said, forgiveness is letting go of the belief that it could have been different. And the belief, if it were, it would be better. I have learned so much about changing my mindset, changing how I view my history. And that's probably one of the things I want to talk about real quick here. My childhood into my teen years were filled with a lot of pain. Family divorce, not a good one. Molested several times. Just loneliness, living alone since I'm 15. You know, a lot of loneliness. Still finished high school. Still driven to make something of myself. Hated myself. I felt like I didn't fit in. I was so filled with shame and loneliness and self-hate. I attempted suicide at 16. I didn't want to live. When I came to that fourth and fifth step, they were the most profound steps for me of all of these. The most profound steps. Because I promise you, if any of you struggle with your fourth and fifth and looking back at the wreckage of the past, my past today, honestly, are the greatest lights and teachers of my life. In there are the greatest lessons to be the man I want to be. In there are the greatest lessons for me to help someone else who's suffering. In there are the greatest lessons of what and who I don't want to do and be ever again. No, those are all lights in my life now. My greatest assets are in what I looked at, the dungeon of the past, the place I was so fearful to look at. I'm grateful for all that today. You know, I am certainly a grateful alcoholic. I am a grateful alcoholic. I really am. God, I never thought I'd say that. Those that said that, I wanted to just get up in the middle of a meeting and smack them a little. How are you grateful to be this? But if it wasn't for this, I wouldn't have learned to live on such a spiritual plane of these principles. I wouldn't have learned to be so connected to my higher power. My sponsor told me early when I was incarcerated, he goes, the day is going to come when you click your heels like Dorothy and you're home. And he meant home with God. Because the illusion that I had was that I was not connected to people. I was not connected to God. I was not connected to purpose. I was not connected to value. But that was all my ego. And what I did was I wanted more and more and more of everything else to get that connection of value and love and being filled with God, sort of thing. And he said that ego's going to die one day when you click your heels like Dorothy. And you're going to realize everything you need is right in here. Because if success and money was a means to an end, I would have been sober and happy. That success and money did not bring that to me. Now, I still want success and money, but it's not going to define who I am anymore. So when I finally, 3 years after I waved my white flag, I got and diligently practicing these principles, diligently getting into the steps, diligently connecting to God, diligently praying and meditating, diligently taking in knowledge and practicing and applying that knowledge diligently in a very hard, dark, challenging, miserable environment. I went out to rec and I just quiet out in the field and I just looked up to that like the sun and just felt the sun in my face. And then I swear to God, I'm not lying. I know it sounds so corny, but I'm just real. That rush of peace came over me. I don't know if anyone can relate. And it never left. It was the weirdest thing. It never left. And my sponsor said I clicked my heels. Because Dorothy in the Wizard of Oz, what was she doing? She was following this road she thought she had to take to meet this magician who'd magically send her home, and everything was an illusion. It was all an illusion. That's the ego. She could have been home anytime they click in the heels. The illusion I had was I had to do all these things to get filled with God or be full and complete. It was all an illusion. Just had to click my heels because it's already here. 1 year before my release, my mother died. Called my brother one morning. He said she passed away last night in bed. Unexpected from cardiac arrest. 2.5 months ago, my father passed away, who was my best friend. Best friend. My person. 5 years ago, this week, when I got out of prison, I didn't have anything. I had a couple $1,000s in the bank. I had no money. I had no car, suspended license, no employment. I'm gay. I'm a felon. Spring Hill. That says it all right there. And I'm from Miami. You know, my family lives here. They all said to me, we're not going to give you a penny. We'll give you a roof over your head for a year or two, but that's it. You got to get on your feet. And because I live this way, and I'm connected to God, and I practice these principles, and I have friends here who know me, and I practice what I preach to the very, very best of my ability. Now, I'm grateful I got friends that will call me out when I don't practice what I preach. Sometimes they remind me of what I tell everyone else, because I get stuck, all right? And I congratulate myself for being imperfect. I congratulate myself that I am still a work in progress, not perfect, because that's what this is, progress, not perfection. Because I practice the principles, I live connected to God 24 hours a day. This faith and my connection to God is in and through me, like the big book says, 24 hours a day or we perish, and I believe that. Because of living spiritually, I have rebuilt an amazing career. I have my first book published. It's called The Art of Self-Mastery. Imagine that. I'm not promoting. I'm building a speaking business now. I have a beautiful little house. I got a Jeep and a Mazda Miata. They're a little old, they're used, weren't very expensive, but I love Jeeps. I was able to get some of that stuff. It doesn't if I lose the Jeep, I lose the Jeep. I lose the car, I lose the car. I lose the house, I lose the house. Because if I'm connected to God, and I'm a man of integrity, and I live the principles, there is nothing that can truly harm me. If there's no enemy within, no enemy on the outside can cause me harm.